to Laughing in the Dark, the podcast where I hang out in haunted places with comedians. I'm your host, Sarah Jones. This is another fixture in our Minisode series where I talk to listeners just like you and hear your own personal ghost stories. For this Minisode, I got to speak to Anthony in Durham, North Carolina. Here's the call.
Hello?
Hi, Anthony. This is Sarah calling from Laughing in the Dark. How are you?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Where am I calling
Good.
you from?
Well, I don't know where you're calling me from. I'm in Durham, but I don't know where you are.
Oh, good question. I'm in Los Angeles. I guess the way I worded that is fucked up. You're totally right. Wait, where are you again, you said?
Durham, North Carolina.
Durham, North Carolina. Okay. I'm in Los Angeles,
Yeah,
California, so not super
Okay.
close. Great.
Yeah, so you got up early this morning then?
I did get up early this morning. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I have another ghost story call today at 11 a.m. PST, and
Mhm.
that caller, I think, was confused about time zones. And they were like, we've been
Ah.
sitting around waiting for this call. And I'm like, oh, shit. I had to remind my assistant, be like, make sure you see where they're calling from so that they're not like it's going to be 2 p.m. your time.
Mhm. So it's noon here, so it's what? It's 8 there, is that right?
It's 9 a.m. here.
9 there, okay.
Okay, yeah, and I'm not sure where this other caller is, but yeah, it's something to be conscious of. It's weird, like we're all in the same country, but there's so many different time zones.
Yeah, I've driven coast to coast twice now, and it's always weird watching the hours screw with you as you go back and forth.
Wow, yeah. What made you do that?
So I've done it twice, and both times it's been 9 days. Where I will, leave here Durham and go to the West Coast and get back 9 days later.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I'm from I'm from Michigan, so it's a 3-hour time difference there. It seems like it's the same time as it is for you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my mom will just call me at 5 a.m. like just not bothered at all. I've only lived on the West Coast for like 8.5 years, so like maybe she just needs more time to
just a full decade to get used to it.
Right, yeah, just to get used to it. All right.
I'm from Grand Rapids, actually, so where are you from?
Oh, no shit. I lived in Grand Rapids for 4 years.
Okay.
But yeah, so you're from Grand Rapids. I'm from Metro Detroit, Michigan. I went to college at Grand Valley.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't go that much. I was working at a bar in Easttown, but yeah, that's fun. All right, so I understand you have a ghost story for me. Is that right?
I've got a story, but I don't have a better word to call it than a ghost story.
Okay, all right, that's intriguing.
All I really saw is a shadow that I don't have any explanation for. But if you can imagine, because I've told this story before, and I find that this is the easiest way to set it up.
Okay.
There are two large rooms with a large square doorway between them. And the lights are on in one room, but off in the other room. You would see the light shining through that square doorway onto the opposite wall of the room where the lights are off.
Yeah, I can totally visualize that.
Okay. So that was the situation where what's funny is years later, I still get kind of nervous when I talk about this.
Oh, really? Sorry to hear that, but thank you for volunteering it.
Yeah, that's okay. So basically that was the situation where you can see the square of light coming through the doorway and being on the opposite wall. And I'm walking through the doorway and I can see my shadow on that opposite wall. And it looks like a normal shadow. It's gray and it's fuzzy and it's got, blurred edges.
Sure.
And then beside my shadow, in that same square of light, is what was a pitch black shadow. And I should point out, this is when I was no older than 15, a young teenager. But this shadow was like clearly darker than mine, clearly taller than mine, more in shape than I was, and it was like, instead of being gray and fuzzy at the edges, it was like so crisp that you could even see like the lapel of the collar, and like a tidy haircut.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, that's pretty much what I saw, and it wasn't like it was a flash and then it was gone. I mean, I stared at it for, I'm sure it felt longer than it was, but probably 30 seconds or so.
Yeah. And so it looked like a man, basically.
It looked like a man,
like a shadow
like
figure
a full-grown
of a man.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, it was like a full-grown man, more in shape than I was, and I stared at it for long enough for like the shock to get over me of like, what the heck is that, to move towards like figuring out what it is. So I would move left, and it didn't move, and I would move right, and it didn't move, and like kind of just move around and see if it would move, and it didn't. And then eventually I just turned around, like maybe there's something on the light bulb in the room behind me and it's casting a weird shadow.
Right.
And so I turned around to look at the light bulb, and there was nothing on it. And then I turned back around and the shadow was gone.
So just to clarify, when you saw the shadow didn't move. It was just standing there?
Yeah, it was to my memory pretty much stationary.
Okay, interesting. So now, okay, a couple questions. You perfectly described this room, but what was this home? Was this like your childhood home? Like, where was this?
Yeah, so this was up one county north of here in, don't run describe it as a podunk town, but it's a kind of podunk town, Roxborough, North Carolina.
Okay.
And this was my father's house, which was right across the road from a graveyard, whether or not that's of any interest or not. But so our front yard growing up was it was a nice yard. It was sort of pretty big oak trees and grass lawn, and then 2-lane dead-end road. But then directly across from that was a graveyard.
Okay. And how old were you when you saw this figure?
I would say young teen. I definitely wasn't older than 15. Probably maybe a little younger than that.
So like 13 to 15 around.
Somewhere in that ballpark. Okay.
And how much longer did your dad live in this house after you saw the figure?
So, he just moved out of that house less than 6 months ago.
Oh, wow. I mean, I don't know how old you are now. You sound older than 13
I'm going on 30.
15. Okay.
Yeah, wow. I'm going on 30, and that house, this is a family story that he always shares, is that he bought that house, and coincidentally, the first night that we lived in that house was the night that my sister was actually born. So we got the house, and it was like, okay, let's go to the hospital. And my sister was born the same day that we got that house.
Interesting.
She's 26 now, so
26. Okay. Wow. So after you saw that figure, your dad had that home for at least 15 more years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the only paranormal experience that you had in that home?
The only one that I had, yes.
Did other people have an experience?
So my mother, and I say this with a grain of salt because she was the world's biggest fan of every Unsolved Mysteries episode and every
me too
thing of that sort of that. Same here. It's on Hulu. So if you want to binge it.
Oh my God, it is? I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, it is the Robert Stack. Yeah, I don't think it's all of it. I think it's certain episodes, but it's quite a bit of it is up on Hulu. So I've done some binging of that myself. But my mother was a huge fan of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And she always said that my mother always said that when my sister was young, she would like stare at the wall in weird places and things like that. And she interpreted that as my then very, very young sister seeing things.
Hmm.
That, so I don't give that much credit, but it was something that she said. It was something that she believed for sure.
Okay, but that was her only experience, was like her baby just staring at things?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. Especially being across the street from a cemetery. I bet your mom loved that, huh?
Yeah, yeah. It was so that land was kind of it was rural farmland, and it was uh, basically just extended relatives of mine. Like my grandmother's buried there,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
all kinds of great aunts and uncles and things like that.
So
So
it's just a
I
family
think it was
cemetery?
extended family. Like I mean, I couldn't tell you most of the names of the people there, but I mean, I would imagine it's sort of hard to say. So I would imagine that there's at least 20 people buried there, but probably at least half of those, the grave stones themselves. This graveyard's been there so long that the gravestones themselves are basically just like eroded, and you can't read the names on a lot of them.
Right.
Um, and
But
I've,
they're all people related to you?
I think so. I think I've heard family uh, rumors, stories that like there may even been like however many great grandfathers ago this would have been. That there may have even been like the slaves of the family buried there because at one point my family owned a decent chunk of the land in that area and was agricultural. And they say, I don't know if there's any if this holds water or not, but that there were family owned slaves at some point.
That they were family what at some point?
Family owned slaves at some point.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
speculated that there may have been slaves of the family buried um, in that graveyard. Whether or not that's just stories that somebody told to scare us kids, probably, but that's was something that was because everyone in the area is cousins and distant relatives of each other.
So your family was pretty prominent in that town of North Carolina.
Yeah, let me see. It would have been my grandmother's family would have been the Oakleys and the Claytons, and if you go through the phone book, the Oakleys and the Claytons are probably each name takes up a fifth of the phone book. So
Interesting. Yeah. Well, then, yeah, that brings up several ideas. I mean, I didn't realize the cemetery across the street was so deeply connected to your family, being that it is your family. Um,
hmm
so yeah, I mean, you say that even now, when you tell the story of this shadow figure that you saw, that you still
hmm
get nervous.
hmm
So it sounds like it was a kind of a negative presence, like it was a fearful presence.
I don't know that I necessarily felt threatened by it. Um, it was more of I still would say that I'm not like even after seeing this. Weirdly enough, I would still say I don't know if I necessarily believe in ghosts.
Okay.
So, maybe I'm nervous that maybe I was having a brain aneurysm or something like that. um, so yeah, I kind of fully attribute this to uh, just the human brain going haywire more
Okay.
so than the supernatural. Um, but that's just that's just kind of how I perceive it. So maybe that's why I get nervous about it, or I don't tend to put much stock on the supernatural. So maybe that's why it makes me nervous. But
So that's what I'm trying to boil down to. Like, why does it make you nervous, do you think?
uh, I'm not sure. Maybe it's because it's the only time I've experienced something like that. It's definitely not like a routine part of my life. So
So you think it just because it's out of the norm for you, it's difficult for you to describe or to even
hmm
understand. So that uncertainty is what makes you nervous, do you think?
yeah, that'd probably be a good way to put it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to because the reason I ask is some people have a paranormal experience and they say, you know what, though, I felt this like really warm presence, and they'll attribute that
Mm,
to maybe they're religious. They'll attribute it to like a religious feeling of like an angel or like, Mother Mary or some other deity to them. Or
mm,
they'll feel like, oh, it was like a family member watching over me or something like that. And other people describe, this feeling of fear and like freezing inside and all of these different types of emotions that they experience. And I think that we as animals are so instinctual that the feeling is honestly more telling than what we're actually seeing,
mm,
not necessarily even just with paranormal experiences, but you walk into a room sometimes and you go, okay, something here just feels wrong,
mm,
or you
mm,
meet someone and you go, something about this person is just like throwing me off,
mm,
we have these like feelers inside of us that we can tell, like, okay, what's happening here, which is why when you said I get nervous telling it later, that's why I had to like understand where that was coming from. But it sounds like it has
mm.
nothing to do with the entity itself. It's more to do with your feeling uncomfortable, not being able to understand exactly what the experience was.
Yeah, I think it's a fair way to put it. Because that was like, especially like at the time of seeing it, my expression or my feeling was more of like almost just like turning the corner and there being like just a stranger in your house. You're like,
Right.
who the heck is that? What are you doing here? You don't belong in here. Get out.
Yeah.
So it was very, um, yeah, it was weird. Like I said,
Yeah.
because it wasn't, um, yeah, it was weird. Like I said, I saw it, and it felt like a solid 30 seconds. I just stood there and like, uh, you know, played with it almost, like move left and see if it would react, and of course after it vanished, I poked around the house for probably the rest of the day, and I would turn off one lamp and like go stand in the doorway and see if the shadow would reappear and turn
Right.
on a different lamp and just like play with all the light sources and move things around and see if I could get it to reappear. And of course, it never did. But
Right.
um,
How was it
yeah, so
sleeping in that house after that experience?
how was it? I'm sorry, how was it living in the house?
Yeah, or just going to bed. Like, didn't you ever think about it before you were trying to fall asleep?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it helped that this was on the ground level of the house and my bedroom was in the basement of the house,
Okay.
so there was a bit of like maybe a mental separation there.
Sure.
Um, yeah, there was, but it was, I don't know. Like I said, I guess it was for me more of a inquisitive thing, and
Yeah.
maybe I just put some mental separation between me and it, and maybe that's what let me, you know, get a good night's sleep at some point afterward. But yeah, I don't know. I think it was an experience for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's. I still think about it. Like I said, this is my father's house. He moved out maybe six months ago. So every time I would.
Thanks so much for your call, Anthony. What a wild experience. If you have a great ghost story, we want to hear from you. Email us at liddarkpodcast@gmail.com and tell us all about your ghost story. We may want to feature you on the show. As always, thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time right here on Laughing in the Dark. Laughing in the Dark is brought to you in part by Heck Yeah Studio. Heck Yeah Studio is a creative effort working with people to create meaningful things. At Heck Yeah Studio, they work with clients to turn their ideas or existing brands into real or better versions. Heck Yeah Studio is the place to go for custom illustration for a full range of branding services, like killer logos, great colors and typography, and fun illustrations for pins, signs, prints, shirts, vehicles, posters, or anything you can imagine. At Heck Yeah Studio, they work with love. Their dream client is someone who is passionate about what they do. At Laughing in the Dark, Heck Yeah Studio has designed our logo, all of our merch, and any posters or stickers that we have. I am so proud and lucky to work with such an awesome company, and I could not recommend them higher.